we're joined by the incredibly talented Ali Dunn. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Great. So, can you begin by telling our listeners just a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am the founder and executive director of a nonprofit organization called Feminism Network. I founded the organization about 3 years ago now, along with two of my colleagues, Jade Greer and Simran Panach. Um, And yeah, DFN is a 501(c)(3) nonprofit that works to promote equitable and gender sensitive data systems for better, more inclusive decision making. I'm sure we'll jump more into DFN, what the organization does and what that means. But outside of DFN, I also worked in the film industry as a stunt performer for 20 years. So kind of a big career pivot there, moving into the world of data. And in addition to my work at DFN, I also work as a data scientist for a tech company.
That's so interesting. That's such a diverse range of career paths that you've gone down. That's really interesting. So, can you tell us a bit more about the Data Feminism Network? What made you want to start it? What was kind of the motivations behind that?
Definitely. DFN has evolved significantly since its founding in late 2020, where it was initially born from a personal interest to explore the intersection of gender equality and data. At the time, I knew that I was interested in data science and I wanted to pursue a career in that field, but I've also always been very impact driven, and gender equality was one of those things that really just spoke to me. And so I wanted to see if there was a way that I could leverage my data skills to promote and work to advance gender equality. So that's where it really began. I started looking for like minded people who shared that passion. I was in a master's program at the time. We had just started. So I met a few people in the same program as well as in kind of partner programs within the school who had similar interests and we complemented each other's knowledge well. So we began building the organization. And as we did, it kind of started as leveraging data for gender equality, which is a great mission in and of itself. But the more that we learned about the intersection of data and gender, the quicker we realized that the fight for gender equality is the fight against all forms of oppression. So from there, our mission and our vision really evolved beyond gender
Mhm.
to kind of explore how data can benefit or disproportionately harm people from all marginalized communities, not just marginalized genders. And the organization was inspired by the book Data Feminism by Catherine D'Ignazio and Lauren F. Klein. They're not officially affiliated with the organization, although they've been great mentors to us throughout the years. They're just such great people and really embody the principles of data feminism. But yeah, that's where the inspiration was drawn from. And so we kind of began to expand and explore data as a form of power. And we really wanted to create a community where all data driven decision makers could learn about these concepts that affect our everyday lives because we found that these conversations were happening within nonprofit organizations, within governments, but they weren't happening amongst the general public. So that's the gap that we were really trying to fill. So we took a knowledge sharing, community driven approach where we could all learn about this topic together.
That's so interesting. No one really thinks of, I guess, gender and data being so linked, like you mentioned. I think it's so interesting to see that there is that link between them. So you mentioned marginalized communities. How important do you think access to tech, and the digital community as a whole is for marginalized communities?
Access to technology and the digital community is incredibly important for marginalized communities
Mhm.
for a few reasons. The first one that comes to mind is you'll hear the word bridging the digital divide a lot in this field. And what that refers to is the gap between those who have access to technology and the internet and those who don't. And marginalized communities such as low income people, people from rural populations, and other, ethnic minority groups are disproportionately affected by this divide. And so access to technology helps bridge this gap, providing opportunities for education, employment, and just social connection generally.
Mhm.
And so that's a huge reason why it is so important to access, give access, provide technological access to the digital community. And a huge part of that is also we need to empower marginalized communities to be able to advocate for themselves. And in order to do that, they need to understand the tech that is influencing their everyday lives. So the education component is really important in order to bridge that digital divide um, between marginalized communities and the powerful few.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think we come from such a privileged kind of uh, background that we have access to tech, we have access to the digital community, we know how to use tech. And I think we kind of forget that not everyone has that knowledge, not everyone has that access. So yeah, that's really interesting. So more onto your background as in the entertainment industry. Um, I've kind of stalked your IMDb. I've looked at everything. It looks so interesting. Um, so how has your experience in the entertainment industry influenced your perspective on gender representation and stereotypes? And I guess also in the data kind of field.
That's a great question. Growing up in the film industry, I mean, similar to STEM fields and other data fields, being a stunt performer, the stunt community is also extremely male dominated. Although
Mhm.
I'm very happy to say I'm definitely seeing a shift in more recent years. There are more women getting into the industry, which is incredible. But growing up, like I said, I grew up in the film industry. So I did my first stunt when I was like 5 and
Oh.
only recently retired from that field. But growing up, there was one female stunt coordinator,
Hmm.
one. And having that one person to look up to and see in a leadership position made all the difference for me.
Hmm.
And even with that in mind, I think I was very fortunate growing up in a male dominated industry in the sense that my dad, who was my main instructor, mentor when it came to all things stunts, he always taught me that I can do anything the boys can do. I had
Hmm.
two brothers who also were in the industry, and we were all treated the same. And he really kind of taught me that I can do anything that boys can do. So my personal experience, I was very fortunate in that sense, and never felt less than or never felt intimidated by
Hmm.
the lack of female representation in the industry. But in more recent years, as I've gotten older, I've come to realize that film in particular, like film and TV in general, can really has a ton of power to perpetuate stereotypes in several ways. I
Hmm.
think lack of representation is the obvious one. Historically, many films have underrepresented and misrepresented certain groups, perpetuating stereotypes. Many marginalized communities, like the LGBTQ community, for example, and people with disabilities, have often been portrayed through a very narrow, stereotypical lens that
Hmm.
can reinforce existing biases. There's a great film about it called Disclosure that I
Hmm.
think it more specifically talks about how trans people have been represented in film throughout history and how that can influence people's biases.
Hmm.
So that's a big one. Great film that I would recommend. Um, and then things like cultural misappropriation and things like that are also um, something that film has the potential to perpetuate. But on the flip side, representation in media, including in film, can have the opposite effect. It can counter stereotypes. It can shape perceptions in a positive way, and it can broaden perspectives. And I think we're definitely seeing that shift in more recent TV and film productions as a result of kind of the changing political landscape. So
Mhm.
I'm very happy to see those changes coming about.
Yeah, yeah, it's great to see kind of progressive change in different industries. And so like you mentioned, you had the kind of one female stunt coordinator, and that was someone you looked up to and kind of inspiration. So I mean, now you're a leader in your field. You're up there for, young girls to look up to and say, she can accomplish anything and so can I. So, what advice would you have for young girls and women who are wanting to enter the field in data and kind of the tech world?
I would say do it. Don't let, I mean, I understand that entering any STEM field that is male dominated or any male dominated field generally can be intimidating
Hmm.
for it can be intimidating for women, for marginalized communities generally, and other people who aren't well represented in those fields. And so something that really helped me throughout my career is talking to as many people as possible. I went really hard into the LinkedIn coffee chats,
Yeah.
and I think you'd be surprised by how many people reply and are open to chatting and sharing their knowledge. And I think that's how it all starts, you know? I have been very fortunate throughout my early career to have several female mentors who I connected with via LinkedIn or via friends of colleagues who really helped propel my career when they had no reason to believe in me aside from the fact that I seemed ambitious, I seemed keen, I seemed passionate. And oftentimes that's enough. Just that
Mhm.
interest, that passion. If that comes across, I think you'd be surprised by how many people are willing to provide advice and provide guidance. And so, if you are able to work for free as well, if you're looking to enter a new field and you don't have experience, you're willing to work for free for someone that you admire or someone whose career path you admire, all about that. So I think finding that mentorship early on is a great way to build your confidence, build your experience, and then also get kind of inside tips as to how to navigate these fields as a woman or as someone else from a different marginalized communities, whether you're a certain race. I think finding mentors who are like you in that way, they often have very good advice to share, and they're always happy to do that in my experience.
Yeah, that's some great advice. I think, yeah, people are always so willing to help out on LinkedIn. I think it's really nice. I think it's a really nice community that you can gain and kind of develop some skills. It's so great. So going back to more kind of the tech aspect and more the data aspect, what are some steps we can take to promote inclusivity, fairness, and kind of diversity within the digital landscape?
I think when it comes to promoting inclusivity, fairness, and diversity within this landscape, it really requires a collective effort from various stakeholders. A
Mhm.
few steps that can be taken is first and foremost education and awareness, which is what we try to do at DFN, promoting education and general awareness about diversity, inclusivity, and fairness in the digital space can really encourage and highlight the importance of diverse perspective, combating online harassment, or just understanding the impact of bias. So that awareness piece is crucial to start so that people are aware of this problem and understanding that why is it important, why is this something that we should care about. And in terms of that why, not only is it important to highlight the possible negative impacts of biases and lack of diversity, but sometimes what I've learned is, especially when you're talking about larger organizations who have the power, who have the data, data is a form of power that
Mhm.
affects all of our lives in our increasingly technological world. Sometimes you got to speak their language. So talking about not only the potential negative consequences of failing to account for diversity, equity, inclusion, but also talking about the potential benefits.
Mm.
Having a diverse workforce can lead to innovation, creativity. It can help you identify gaps in your products or services. Because, if you have a group of very similar people, they're going to have collective blind spots.
Mhm.
And when you bring in more diverse people, it will address those blind spots, which will help eliminate bias, but it'll also help drive profit in many scenarios. And so, although I hate to say that that is the case, I think it definitely is important to think about the audience that you're talking to get
Yeah.
them to understand
Mhm.
and to make those changes.
Yeah, completely agree. Um, so finally, what are your hopes and aspirations for the future of feminism and more specifically feminism within the tech industry? How do you kind of envision those fields fostering a more inclusive and welcoming environment for everyone?
That's a great question. I really hope to see feminism continue to advance and promote gender equality and equity across the board in all aspects of society.
Mhm.
Um, a few kind of concrete aspirations for the future are equal representation. I want to see our companies and our workforces look like the world we live in.
Yeah.
I want to see companies addressing bias. So when it comes to the tech industry, I want to see those tech firms actively addressing and eliminating biases, both conscious and unconscious, in things like recruitment, hiring, promotion, and also decision-making processes. Um, Especially for those data-driven tech companies, I want to see them tackling the biases that are embedded in algorithms and AI systems to ensure fairness and equal opportunity for everyone. I want to see inclusive work cultures, which I think we're definitely seeing that shift. I
Mhm.
want to see more women empowering women when it comes to tech firms. I'm definitely seeing more and more of that, but I hope to continue seeing increased support and empowerment for women in tech industries. And that can look like, mentoring programs, networking opportunities, leadership and development initiatives, but providing those resources and platforms for career advancement for women in tech is so important. So I hope to see more of that.
Yeah.
Um, and then yeah, just like lots of collaboration and collaborative efforts between tech firms and driven by women within those tech firms is a few things that I hope to see going forward.
Those all sound really, really, that is what we should be aspiring towards, I guess. But that's all from me. Thank you so much for your time and for answering all these questions and this great conversation. I enjoyed all the advice and your kind of opinions on feminism and data. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.